by knowing and staying into balance, physical, mental, social, emotional, spiritual, um, what burnout is and what, preventing burnout and proactive behavior, how to reset and repair the body and the mind, right? So I go over compassion fatigue and what that looks like, and then why we have to have boundaries, because to prevent burnout, we have to have boundaries. That's number one. Um, to prevent um, getting out of balance, we have to have boundaries. That's number one. So we really, and I've got several workshops more on boundaries, but we really need to know what that looks like. And there's just, a little bit of a touch on that. So we practice. How do we practice and maintain and manage coping skills, right? So I don't know about you, but you guys are my hero. I don't know about who your guys' heroes are, but teachers are my heroes, and in so many ways. I mean, as my own experiences with coaches and teachers, when I was a foster parent of 25 kids, sending these kids to school to you guys was such a challenge, and working with so many teachers. I have quite a few friends that are teachers. I don't know what it is, but I have lots of friends that are teachers too, where I used to live and where I live now. And, so I have this 20-year experience with teachers. I've also been an adjunct professor myself, and I have taught at the university level. And I don't enjoy teaching. I enjoy learning. I'm not a teacher, I'm a learner. And I never knew that that's what I was going to be, because I hated, and that's a strong word, I only use it a few times. I hated learning. I hated reading. I didn't do well in high school. But here, starting at 33, going to a university and getting my degrees is where I started. And so it's like I became a learner, and I have shifted my mindset to being a learner. I'm a book. I actually have a disorder of ordering books and reading books, but like totally. My private practice website is paperbackconnections.com, because I love books. I can't find enough shelf space, and I order, at least, 6 or 7 a month. And I go through a lot of audibles, and each time I teach these workshops, I read and listen to at least 2 or 3 books. And it's always got lots of books of reference in the back of these PowerPoints, and they're all on a book. So I've got, 4 of them sitting here. We'll go over a little bit, but it's just so you can take that book and go further if you want to. And that's just how I roll, because I only go with my top 5 books that are the highest researched authors, off research and what is out there for relationships and therapy and self-help. And so this is where we go into practice and managing. That's the coping skills through, facing your obstacles, mindfulness, maintenance, growth mindset. We're going to talk about in your environments. So we're going to talk about all those things and more. And we're going to really look at your environment. I just had multiple people, friends, teachers, colleagues, and clients that have really struggled this year. So how do we maintain and regroup, right? So which one are you? Are you in PTSD? Are you sick? Or are you calm? I don't know. Do a little, I always have people do a little, psychotherapy on themselves every day. What does that look like? Are you this, purple woman here? It's like totally cool. Or are you in complete PTSD, or chronic fatigue, or secondary trauma, or compassion fatigue is what we're going to talk about. Or are we just physically sick, right? I used to be able to eat Snickers all the time down here. I like chocolate. I like donuts. I can't eat sugar like that. So it makes me sick. But so I love this little Snickers sick. But are we in fear brain? Are we in complete, burnout? Or maybe you're not. And I want you guys to comment on how you stayed out of burnout this year and how you've coped. Maybe, we're doing really great, but don't know, from what I can see. So this is just my little chart that I have everywhere in all kinds of workshops, that sleep, diet, and exercise are my number one. I can't treat anyone if they're not sleeping, if they're not eating, and if they're not moving. So that's my number one. And I have a parenting workshop on sleep hygiene versus power struggles. And it's not just for parenting, it's just a general like sleep hygiene one. If you want to check it out, if you're not sleeping, there's really good ways and understanding on how to reverse that and get into your circadian rhythm. And so emotional and spiritual, we've got to be able to sleep before we can be emotionally intelligent and grounded and connected. And then social's gone out the window for a year. We got really disconnected, and we have some issues with that with schools and the students, and I think most of the time we can stay in mental pretty good because it's logical, and students can stay in mental very good, and people that are at work, we do really well usually, at the job, and we can get there on time, we can focus, we can have a higher purpose, but then we crash, so usually mentally we can do okay. But if you're brain fogged, if you're mentally, you don't have the ability to do new tasks, and we'll talk about these 10-minute distractions that you can do to reset. So just keep in mind, that's just a basic balance, and that's what we want to look at is, where are you? Are you 10% emotional, spiritual? Are you 10% in everything? Are you, 5% everything? Or are you, balanced and you're way, more emotional and spiritual, but you have no physical, mental balance? So just kind of look at that and reevaluate what that looks like for you. So here's some statistics. I'm always a delivery of great news. I'm a therapist of a little bit of a, it's like, here's some good news, and everyone's like, thanks for the good news. As many as 41% of all teachers in the US will leave the profession within the first year. Okay. About 500,000, 15% of teachers in the US leave the profession every year. Teacher burnout rates are also 50% higher in Title I schools. Now, when I was doing these statistics and looking for, I thought, oh my gosh, my mom worked in a Title I school for 29 years. And yeah, you know what I'm talking about with Title I schools. She was an aide. 66 of all teachers considered leaving the teaching profession. Yeah, this is our future, right? 36% of teachers do leave their job, and 41% of all new teachers leave the profession within the first 5 years. That's a horrible statistic, 41% within the first 5 years. So that tells me that's burnout. This isn't for me, and that's fine. There's lots of things that, people go get a degree in and leave the profession, but at the same time, that's a big turnover. So that's a lot of turnover for administrators and kids, and and the school districts. But yeah, 36 leave within 4 years. So yeah, it's a little bit of burnout going on, whatever that looks like. So here's some definitions of burnout. This is my favorite thing. So this is where I joked about this for many months this last year and a half. So the honeymoon stage, it's really simple. The first month of COVID was a honeymoon burnout. We were excited to work from home and be in our pajamas and eat, a bowl of cereal at noon in our pajamas and have school online in March and April and May. It was a joke, but it was like, oh, this is honeymoon. This is so we get to stay home and regroup and make dinner. We went, to the store more than ever before, and we stayed home and we didn't go out. And so it was a honeymoon stage. And then the onset of stress happened. And that's within the first month, after a month. Okay. So after that, then we go into chronic stress. That's 1 month to 6 months. After 6 months, it basically isn't, acute stress anymore. it's PTSD. So what happens is post-traumatic. So that's what we've lived in, honestly, for 6 months plus, and it's chronic, right? And then we go into burnout. And then if it's chronic, we go into this burnout level of autopilot. And I want to know if anyone's in there, you know. And then habitual is that 2 years plus chronic, really chronic burnout. It's not just stress anymore, it's burnout. And then you have these burnout reactions, cognitive, emotional, behavioral, and physiological. So you think about the kids that are burned out and employees that are burned out. What in the world are we going to help them with if they can't physically concentrate? They don't have, they're confused, they have short-term memory issues, they have racing thoughts and focus on the negative. Those are all thinking errors that happen in the cognitive. If you have your bad habits return, your sleep disturbances, aggression really returned. I am not kidding. Lots of companies are like, we have aggression skyrocket. We've had road rage, the statistics for the last year of road rage, 300% increase in accidents in certain times than last year. Is that weird? We're road rage, we're not present. We're in autopilot. Increased fatigue and dizziness and headaches and difficulty breathing. You know, that sounds like a heart attack. So you have to make sure that these are not these come on slow, right? And you have withdrawal and impairing listening skills or you know, they're compromised. We don't have really good behavioral issues with relationships when we're in burnout. So we can't expect our kids to like have this motivation and ability. And then if we're burned out, you know, we can't, I always say to parents, you can't de-escalate when you're escalating. If you're escalated in burnout, you can't de-escalate burnout, you know, as a teacher, as a parent, with your partnerships, it's really difficult. So we have to get out of that. And you can. There is definitely a protocol to how to get out of burnout. So we have to look at compassion fatigue, because secondary trauma, which I'm going to talk about in a second, and burnout combined equals compassion fatigue. And I don't think we understand what compassion fatigue is. And I didn't understand it until I had several clients come to me and say, I have secondary trauma from my job. I work with youth, or I work with, you know, and I have secondary trauma. And so I did a PowerPoint just on that. And that's a little bit of this on what compassion fatigue is and how to get out of it when you have a lot of secondary trauma and burnout combined. So these are just caregivers, and teachers are caregivers. They're on that list of what we take in as secondary trauma from people that we work with. We're not isolated in, you know, a closet working. We're coping with a whole bunch of kids and their stressors, and that is secondary trauma. So a little bit, you know, of definition here in compassion fatigue. Here's some warning signs for staff. I mean, and you might not be able to see this PowerPoint, but when you get it sent to you, it's, you know, you can look at it when it's bigger. My screen's big, so it looks good, but it's when you're not, if you can't see the screen, then you can look at this later. But there's impaired ability to make decisions for clients, for students, just put it that way. Increased exhaustion, irritability, anger, increased use of alcohol, dread of working with certain clients, meaning so clients, just change that to students for you. So dread of working with certain, you know, students, dismiss, you know, the sense of enjoyment. I have heard that from teachers and other employees of other companies. I have so much focus on all the stuff that's going wrong of COVID and administration choices and fear of getting sick, fear of the fear. So we're in such fear brain. It causes extreme exhaustion. And it goes into disassociation, it goes into denial, it goes into phobias. So we have developed some phobias. I mean, that's what that is. And so then we go into coping skills. Sometimes those are good, sometimes those are not self-soothing. So just watch these warning signs and your own personal life. In comparison to burnout, compassion fatigue results from caregivers who frequently must deal with highly distressing situations involving their patients or their students. So, yeah. So look at that. So secondary trauma, it's definitely equivalent to PTSD. Okay, it's the same thing. It has the same time frame. It has this, if it's chronic, if it goes on to, then it turns into compassion fatigue. We don't have empathy. And these are social workers, lawyers, teachers, nurses, first responders, and so on, and all of us. Now, at the bottom of this slide, there's a YouTube. I think she's completely hilarious. Beyond the Cliff, click on it, watch it. It's hilarious. I mean, she laughs about it. She gets to the end of the cliff, you know, she burns herself to the end of the cliff. And there's another one that's, you know, coping with secondary trauma, a social work licensenow.com blog that I found good. So those are some resources there, but just, yeah, I think Beyond the Cliff YouTube video was really funny and enlightening and kind of like, yeah, anybody can get there. And then, you know, how do we get off the cliff, you know? Compassion fatigue check-in. Okay, so back to this. This is how we can check in. Okay, you lose your sense of humor. You begin to cut corners at work, you know, and I won't read through all these. You may start to neglect, withdrawal, and detach from your clients, your students, your coworkers, your family, yourself. You're in autopilot. Talked about that. You no longer, you know, do well at your job. You're making a lot of mistakes. I've had a lot of teachers that are just like, I'm just not there. I'm just not focused. I'm not performing at the level that I used to. I've enjoyed my job for 15 years and I want to quit, you know, and that's what I'm hearing. So look at your, you know, if you're depleted and emptied out, that's a soul thing. And excuse me. So we're going to talk about that, caring of the soul. You know, that last one, if you feel like you have nothing left, you serve the soul rather than surface needs of life. You may feel depressed and your relationship may be hurting. Knowing the difference between caring for your soul and managing your life. Okay, so management in life is great, but when you feel depleted and emptied out, and that's your soul, body, mind, spirit, soul is so much different. Your symptoms are raw material of your soul making. Don't take anything literal, but always look deeper. Take time for reflection and conversation. This is just a list of how to help yourself get to your soul. And that's and it's referenced in the back, but it's Caring of the Soul by Thomas More, and we were reading this as a group and in a book club, and so I just have really enjoyed it. Seek another point of view from someone that you trust. That's how you get deeper and go into your soul and get connected again. And we'll talk about that in the kind of like the coping skills at the end of this. So yeah, watch your patterns of sleep. Just and remember that this burnout, then compassion fatigue is, you know, is deeper because you're combining secondary trauma. And then it's severe, it's PTSD, basically, STSD, and it can be chronic, and it can be where you need some outside help for sure, and that's when we go in therapy. So any questions so far? Should I take a break? Everybody's good? Okay. You can always check. something in there. So this is where we go into loss, grief, and worry, right? So here's all the burnout, and this is part of it. That hijacks the brain very first. It causes exhaustion, and so when the hijacked brain is back here, so it hijacks it to your back of your lobes where your fight, flight, or freeze is. The frontal lobes is where we self-talk and reason and reward system, and we have organization up here. And that's what I'm saying. When our kiddos are so disorganized and they are in loss, grief, and worry, they are in their fight, flight, or freeze. Their primal distraction, total defense mechanism brain, and so are we. And if we're in burnout, we're sitting back here in PTSD all the time. So PTSD is not present. This is present. So the reasons why we don't self-talk is when we're in fight, flight, or freeze, when we're in burnout, when we're impaired, and we have a mental disorder that keeps us back here. Autistic kids don't self-talk as much. So here's reason and processing, right? You guys know this. Here's reasoning. We can reason, process, we can focus, right? But autistic ADHD, they don't process and don't self-talk. So they can't say, well, this is just this, or that's happening because of this, or I'm going to do that. They don't self-talk as much. And so they need that coaching, and they need to get back to their frontal lobes more often. And so do we. And that's this little slide that just explains, we have a thought that comes in, we have a feeling, and then we have the behavior. The behavior is the self-talk. And we have to understand why we're not self-talking. And we have to pull ourselves back there. That's mindfulness. So we got to get to the present, Frontal lobe, right, left brain. Up here, frontal lobe is wise mind. That's together. That's mindfulness. So a little bit on that. And then here's chronic loss and grief. Okay, so this is what's happened. So I mean, I know. See, I'm just like full of like good news, right, for everybody. So loss of passion, inspiration, control. This is what statistically has happened in just the teaching. This is the list. Like we have really lost focus, our purpose, our balance, our inspiration, passion. If we lose our passion as teachers, if we lose our passion as parents, as as humans in our soul, then that's where we get lost. We don't have a higher purpose in what we're doing anymore, and we don't have fulfillment. So when all these losses happen, we go into denial and anger and bargaining, and then we have to go into acceptance. So when we go into acceptance, which is the growth mindset, too, then we have a reason, a higher purpose in what we're doing, and we get back our passions and our inspiration. So look at those. And then reactive and proactive. So you've heard of this. How do we go into reactive? And the only reason why we're reactive is we're in our fight, flight, freeze. That's reactive brain. We don't have self-talk. We're not present. So proactive is pleasure, and we can be imperfected, and it's okay. We have passion, we have physical health, we play, we have power, we can pace ourselves, we have balance. Okay. So this is this side, reactive, this is proactive. We have compassion again. We connect with our unharmed. Okay. So does that make sense? Connecting with our unharmed is our soul. So finding what's unharmed and connecting with that. I don't need to connect with my harmed unless I'm doing therapy and trauma work. So connecting with your unharmed is very, very important. It's like, okay, how do we connect with these kids that are hurt and harmed in stressors? And how do we hold the hurt? We hold it, we live in it, and it's okay. And we attune, we release shame, we find power, we get grounded, balanced. So another list of like how to convert to proactive behavior. And then we're going to go into balance, and we're going to go into growth mindset, and a little bit of that stuff. And then I'll stop doing the lecturing, and we'll take a break and do questions and doing coping now, right? Because now we know what's going on a little bit. And we can do an evaluation of ourselves and our jobs and our life and our balance. And then after we've done all this that we've just talked about, then we have to decide where our balance is. Because if we're out of balance, we need to put a boundary around it. Because if we don't put a boundary around it, we never will heal. We never move through it. We stay in chronic burnout. So we have to have boundaries. Boundaries are not walls. Boundaries are our limits, and with choices, we can compromise. We can have lots of different ways to do boundaries. And I am doing boundaries part 2 webinar next month, because now that we have boundaries, how do we hold them? that's the key. That's part 2 of my boundaries webinar that's going to be coming up. So the reaction of relational trauma and shame, we have to stop the reaction of that and reduce it. And how we do that is really boundaries. Again, Brene Brown talks about all of her hundreds of thousands of people that she interviewed, and how she found shame resilient people lived. Number one word, they lived with boundaries, and they had a shame resilient life. They develop, an identity. We have an autonomy. We have identity when we're in that. We have to have an identity of ourselves and our soul to have boundaries. And that will help our mental health, our emotional health. It helps our balance. It helps our relationships. It helps everything. And so that's why we just have a fence. There's a line in the sand. And we have to know what that is, though. And that takes some work. And I do a ton of that in therapy with people. It's like, where's your line in the sand? Well, I don't even know what my needs are. Well, then we've got a problem. We don't even know what your balance is. We don't even know what your boundaries are. We don't know where your needs are. We don't know where you are in your development of your identity. And that's regrouping a little bit. So that was my little spiel on boundaries. There's lots more on what boundaries are and how to do them in several of my other PowerPoints. Boundaries and balance is one of those. Boundaries and parenting is one of those. And boundaries with toxic people are one of those. So if you just go to our YouTube channel, you can see all the videos there. So I'm sure you guys have heard of Carol Dweck, this mindset, fixed versus growth mindset. She has multiple sections in here. Of course, she goes over coaches and teachers, parenting. I have, followed her for years and years. This is not her, this is not new. She has lots of research on this concept. So this is her and explaining a little bit. If you haven't ever gone into mindset and the difference between these two, this is an excellent book. Parenting, business, school, relationships, how we can learn to live our full potential. So mindset frames are the running account that takes place in people's heads. So it's whatever is going on. It's our self-talk. Growth mindset people consistently monitor what's going on. That's exactly what I have said for years. What's going on is the question. And that's what it is. It's monitoring what's going on. So when I do emotional coaching and emotional therapy, emotional intelligence, it's what's going on. What's going on? Not why. I don't do whys. I really don't. Because there's a million reasons why we have an emotion. But what's going on is I feel this. Labeling it is 90% of it, honestly. When I do the anxiety program, we just need to label it, not us, it, what's going on. We label it. Then we can be like, oh, yes, what's going on? And then I'm monitoring this. Then I'm going to find enjoyment in the effort. And I know what you're saying. It's like, yeah, you got to be kidding. There's no enjoyment in the effort of strong emotions or the other kind of emotions. All emotions are good. We just have to say, okay, let's find the enjoyment in this, and what is it teaching me? In the care of the soul, he talks about how to sit in depression and what it's teaching you, right? So, and how to, it's just teaching you something. There's something lacking in there. And so how, what do we need to learn from that? Well, we have to label that. We have to learn from that, and then sit in that depression and say, okay, what is this? Where am I empty? Um, so the people that are in growth mindset, they think about maintenance, growth, gains, and their setbacks as a learning experience. So setbacks are learning. Fixed mindset creates the internal monologue that is focused on judging. So lots of thinking errors, negative cognitions and ants, automatic negative thoughts are also thinking errors, but there's negative cognitions. I am something instead of, well, I feel overwhelmed, but I am overwhelmed is a negative cognition. And then that goes into lots of thinking error stories. And I have my other most favorite thing is thinking errors and explaining cognitive distortions. And there is a PowerPoint on that. I have thinking errors part 1 and 2 that are really good to understand. So if you're really looking into, I'm stuck in this fixed mindset, which happens when you're in chronic stress, trauma, burnout, compassion fatigue, all that, we get into a really good autopilot of fixed mindset. And that is what this creates, is a lot of negative cognitions and thinking errors about self, about society, about groups, then we go into lots of defense mechanisms. And there's more on that if you want to, look up that. So here's the obstacles. Let's talk about obstacles, and hope we can have a little discussion here. What is our obstacles? Accepting that we all have both mindsets. That's an obstacle sometimes. Everybody has both mindsets. We have to learn what our triggers our fixed mindset, like I just named some of them, right? Burnout, when we don't sleep good. What happens in our fixed persona, invite our personal growth and helping others in their journey is how we can, get through obstacles. So what are the opportunities for growth and learning? When and where and how can I embark on our plan? And we have to have a plan. And what do I have to do to maintain and continue growth? Those are that's an obstacle. How do I continue and maintain growth or boundaries, right? So if you can think of some obstacles, the last slide, when we were talking about some questions and answers and some discussion, that's one of the questions. And I'm going to read, I think I'll read some obstacles that I've reported to from a few teachers. These are some obstacles that affected a few teachers this year. Kids becoming afraid of COVID, being near their friends, fearful of future. Learned helplessness, increased animosity towards others with different beliefs, difficulty in communicating with kids that speak a different language because there isn't the verbal, because of the masks, right? So she had difficulty with kids that their second language is English, and so it was hard to understand and watch their language. Their masks were not expressive. We can't see each other or their mouths to learn pronounce words of different languages. Students that were already trying to hide, she puts hide in quotes, they grew out their hair. So, and hats, and, it's like, here's the mask, and then here's my eyes. And she said that, it was like, I couldn't see their faces. Increased workload with everything being online and in person. Coworkers, experienced teachers having panic attacks and frequent absences due to stress. So these are just some things that you can think about. And I kind of, it's like, did you have these too? Have you had these obstacles? And we'll go over like how she dealt with those obstacles. And there was one other one of fatigue, just being fatigued and then having your own personal life going on that was stressful during this last year too, or if you got sick, or if someone else got sick, or those kind of things. It became exhausting, and the obstacles were just our own struggles, our own personal struggles. So think of, some of your obstacles and see if you have the same, um, or not, or some other ones. And then we can all feel like, okay, we can talk about these obstacles and what are the opportunities to grow in those, and where are we going now? What's our plan? What's our plan for the summer? What can we do to continue the growth instead of fixed mindset? So there, I'm a planner, and I think planning definitely works. So here's some obstacles too, um, that have happened in the working conditions, right? So student discipline, teacher cooperation, teacher workload, school material resources become inefficient with considering along with other working conditions. These are just normal stuff, right? Um, so so job satisfaction, of course, is so related to that. So working conditions is an obstacle. So here's some questions. How do we rejuvenate? This is a little bowl, right? So the more you fill up the bowl, right, the more it gets filled up with whatever. Are you using your time off? Are you saying no? Do you celebrate your work? Do you play and relax? So this, the way that she dealt with some of her obstacles, she says she feels like these weren't completely impossible. She's an art teacher and decided to set goals to make my class the more positive and a safe place, possibly to try to create an oasis. And so they started out with different art kits and students to help them to keep the germs down, and then had a really cool project that they did that was really unique. Talked about collaboration, working together, brainstorming together. Kids talked as we worked on the project. This was the favorite project of the year, and I felt like it was really set the tone. Mostly, I just love the kids. They expressed confidence. She expressed confidence on them. It gave them a unique and creative, smart way to love in a way that was empowering. How she dealt with it is she took more time for herself, carrying through exercise, prayer, and meditation, creating an alone and creating alone and with her students. And she also listened to music while they worked every day. So I don't know if you can do that, right? That was unique as a as an art teacher. But so how do you celebrate? How do you say no? How do you take your time? That's how we get out of burnout. So we're going to talk about this one right here, environment. So here's power. It gives you power. So when you fill up your bowl, you have your power back. You're out of the crisis. You're out of the trauma when you take back power. If that's therapy, if that's support, if that's your environment, if that's boundaries, that is what happens. And these are the stepping stones. I'm a visual. I have to make, here's the stepping stones. I self-soothe in a healthy way. I have to focus in the present. I have to find support. I have to have boundaries. And then I have to look at my environment. You have to look at your whole environment. And so this is what this is. There's 9 environments that I talk about. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, 8 environment, but physical and emotional. So here's some basic environments that you have to look at: your home, your work, your relationships, your nature. Grounded, your financial is an environment. Your desk is an environment. So we have to, and this is a little intervention that we're going to go into coping skills of how do we look at all of our environments and clean it up. And I love this. I teach this constantly. How do we clean up our environment? Because if we can't clean up our environment, we can't clean up our soul, we can't clean up our outside, we can't have boundaries around these environments, we won't do well. So this is the example. So this is the first time I've typed it out. So a 10-minute intervention purpose. Okay, so this is an intervention. Okay, So this is very simple. It's a 10-minute intervention. It can be a reward system. When I go clean my car, it's a reward system. It's a 10-minute purpose of not just cleaning out my car, it's to actually clean up my environment and to make me have a reward system. And it is makes me happy because I love driving in my car. It's, there's nothing like having a clean car to me. That's my reward system. It's scheduled. I actually schedule it. I know I make fun of myself. I schedule it. I have an unlimited car wash pass. So I know that I can go anytime. There's no guilt. It is my reward system. So pick an environment, make it a reward. What's your purpose? And getting rid of stored emotions. That's your purpose. So when we store emotions, we don't process them during the day. We go into our subconscious. We don't sleep. We have nightmares. That goes into our subconscious. Then that actually stores in the body as trauma. And then our trauma is stored of like repetitive trauma. So we've got to unlearn and unstore those. Okay. So when I'm weeding, I'm unstoring. I'm getting rid of everybody else's hurt. I'm, getting rid of my own hurt, my own, worries. So weeding is, it's great. Now these are 10 minutes. The key is to time it and to stop. Don't go over 10 minutes if you're doing it for this. You can, I weed for it, but if you're doing it just for this, pick a drawer, set your timer, just do it for 10 minutes. Just put away laundry for 10 minutes. Just do a closet shelf. That's it. So, it's to clean up one of your environments. So if it's nature, we want to clean up nature, then we're going to go out and weed. If we want to clean up our financial situation, we just spend 10 minutes. Now, I would suggest that we do several of these a day, up to 3, so you're picking 10 minutes in each category and you're going to clean it up. You're going to clean up a relationship. You're going to write a letter, an email. You're going to call someone. You're going to take 10 minutes and clean it out, if you will. It's my favorite thing to do for interventions to teach anyways, So this is like, it's very simple, especially like if you're physical. So your physical balance is your environment, your physical. So if you want to eat better, then spend 10 minutes organizing your meal plan, cleaning off your kitchen table so you can have dinner, doing your dishes so you can have dinner that night. That's the whole purpose of a 10-minute intervention. Okay. So how are we doing? Any questions so far?
I haven't had any come through.
The miracle isn't that I finished, right? The miracle is that I had courage to start. I'm, when I was a runner, and I'm not really a runner anymore. But that reminds me of a race, right? So, we're not all in a race, but we've got to start to be able to finish. And if we don't start, we don't heal. So, the power of yet, right here is a YouTube that you can watch. That's Carol Dweck, The Power of Yet. So that one's a good one to watch when you want to get inspired too. Okay, so a mindful skill set. This is just an example of mindfulness. It's a little loving meditation. If you found yourself in that chronic compassion fatigue issue back at the beginning of this PowerPoint, then this is one that you can do daily and kind of get yourself back to ground yourself into empathy and love. So just in case you want to practice this one, it's here. And then here's some questions that we can go over. If we're as kind of a small group today and we don't have many questions or comments, then we'll let you go. But if you have any or comments of like what you've really struggled with, and just, confidentially, send it to Heather, and we won't, say your name or anything. And you can kind of say, okay, what I think the biggest thing is the changes of this year of online, which these things might lighten up next year, right? But how are we going to face them this summer so we have a little bit more of a heads up so we can face them, if we're still going to be doing some online schooling. How have you dealt with that new workload, and how are we going to take time off this summer to regroup? Anybody have any ideas? Because you guys are the experts in how you've faced this, or how you want to have the summer go. Of course, besides taking off and getting out of town and really just getting some time off, because I think that will get a lot of people out of burnout. Any comments on that?
We've got a quiet group today.
So yeah, so I'm just gonna go back to this, work and network.
We just got one. So they
Okay.
said, I am struggling. I work in diversity and inclusion in higher education and beyond fatigue from supporting people through 2021 and COVID. I have a poor relationship with my supervisor. I don't know how to get my energy back.
Okay, so you just named several environments, right? So your physical and emotional health, your relationship, with your supervisor, and then compassion fatigue. It sounds, secondary trauma from all the COVID from everyone. So there's lots of things going on. There's probably half of your environment, is burned out. So maybe you're okay financially and home, or maybe your spirituality is okay. But so the key is okay, so how do you, first of all, I think key is the relationship with your supervisor and your boss or your administrators. It's really difficult to get up every morning and not have a panic attack when you're going to work, when you have that kind of environment. If it's hostile, if it's bullying, if it's just not very inclusive. We've had a lot of companies, talk about that privately with us, because it's like, where else do I talk to someone about it? So the only way to get out of that burnout and to start that is boundaries. So go back to the boundaries thing and say, okay, this is unacceptable, the way you talk to me, or the way that this is happening, or I'm getting activated and triggered. So I go into my passive personality when my boss is being aggressive. That's usually what happens. An aggressive will pick out a passive, and then you will become passive. Passive don't have boundaries. They are yes, and everyone else is right and you're wrong. So that turns into extreme burnout. And passive scares me the most. So I don't know if that's what's going on too. And then we go into higher up, right? We find support. So go back to your, your bull here. Where is your support? Okay. So boundaries, find support first, then have boundaries around that if you need to go to HR. Then look at your environment. And then that gives you power, and your bull is full. Your bull is great, big, and full. So, okay. And so how do you say no? How do you celebrate your work? How do you play and relax? So this is definitely the key. This is just a little visual to say, okay, what support do you have in your employment? If you don't have any, we've got to find some. We've got to go to other places. And that, and that's therapy. You can definitely come in and find support in coming into BlogQuest and doing that too.
That person also followed up, and they said they're
Yeah.
also, it says, and also personal trauma that I'm working through. I am in therapy for inequalities I go through with my supervisor. I have been to HR and their boss. I have been advocating for myself and trying to set boundaries since January, and nothing is changing. I feel like I'm losing the battle.
Okay, good. So yeah, so everything I just said, just throw that out because you've already done it. Awesome. So then it's like nothing has changed. So what do we do when nothing's changed? I don't know. When the basic stuff, right? And you've gone to support and you've gone and nothing's changed. Does that mean you need to change? Does that mean you need to find something else? I don't know, right? And if you're talking to your therapist about that and you're looking at all your options, you start doing a pros and cons list. You make sure you're sleeping good, so you're balanced, and you start looking at pros and cons. You start looking at your life, and a developmental stage in people in different ages will make those changes or not. Not saying I don't tell people, not saying you change your job or change, but something, if it's like nothing has changed, well, then that means you have to go inside yourself and say, what do I need to change about this? Do I need to go into a growth mindset so I can face it? Or do I need to go into a total different department? And do I need to change something? So if you've done that and you're losing the battle, then you've lost the battle. Yeah. And so you need to just reevaluate. Something like that. That's just my ideas. Yeah, so the range of burnout is 0 to 10. Okay. So I do 0 to 10, and SUDS, it's called your rating of your number. When we label our burnout or label any of this, so the last person's comment, she or he, you're probably, at a 9.5 all the time. We can't live in that. We can't live in exhaustion, because that's exhausting to live in that high level of burnout and stress. It statistically, it's one of the worst things that you can do. You can drink yourself, you can eat yourself, you can shop yourself, you can smoke yourself to your self-soothing negative just avoidances, but your distractions have to overweigh the avoidances, and you have to have good distractions. And to get you back to a 5, that's what I teach in the anxiety program. How do you get back to a 5? If you're living in an 8, 9, or 10 all the time, that is extreme. That's an extreme burnout. I have a client now that lives in 8, 9, or 10 all the time. And so we go, oh, well, look, the last 2 weeks I've lived in 5 or 6. I've lived in that space. So if you're at a 12, this is how I describe it. If a kiddo has anxiety in the classroom about something, or they're being bullied, or they have a project coming in, and if they have to leave the classroom and go throw up, that's an 11 out of 10. So if they end up having to leave the situation and throw up, that's a 10 plus. So if you're at a 12, then we've got some therapy to get going on, some self renewal, and that means you're really in a habitual burnout, and that's the last one. So look at that list in the burnout list, and if you're having physiological and cognitive and emotional distress, then do a little check-in with that list. Most of the time, people, if you watch my sleep hygiene, most of the time people, number one, are not sleeping. So if you know what sleep does, it repairs your toxins in your brain every night. Your brain shrinks every night. You have to have REM cycles. You have to be in circadian rhythm. Your body goes into the right page balance every night. All these things, and especially for our kiddos, they're not getting enough. And I know adults are not getting enough. They're just not. And so in my balance workshop, I talk about that a lot, and in the sleep hygiene one. So go into there, and I go over supplements. We are depleted in our diet. So when we're depleted in our diet, we don't get back out of balance or out of burnout. We don't, so there's some supplements you can try. Magnesium is number one for all that. One major issue focused face this year. Number of students